Hi, in today's video I'm going to take a look at installing Fedora 38 Workstation on a Dell XPS 15 with an Nvidia graphics card. What I'm going to do is take you through the setup and what's different from regular versions of Linux you might be used to. Installing the rpmfusion repositories, enabling codecs, setting up ZSH, SSH, firewall, transmission, OBS, and lots of little gotchas I've come across that are slightly different from your regular Linux install. So what I'm going to do is switch across to my settings here, and you can see this is Fedora 38 installed on the Dell XPS 15 7590 with an Nvidia GTX 1650 graphics card, and we're running the latest version of GNOME on Wayland. So what I'm going to do is actually give you a little look and then go through some of the setup. So what I've done is actually removed a lot of the default applications that come installed, and I'll show you how to do that. It's really easy. And what I'm going to do is show you how to set up things like Emacs, MPV, so that you've got hardware acceleration for the videos, OBS Studio using flatpak, transmission, also opening the ports for transmission because Fedora uses NF tables instead of IP tables, so the configuration is slightly different. So what I'm going to do is switch across to Emacs here and actually go through some of the setup. So first of all, obviously what we need to do is download Fedora, and you just basically come across here and download the ISO. Now, after you've done that, what you need to do is obviously burn the ISO to a USB stick, and you can use a graphical utility or you can use the command line. So on the command line, what you do is plug in your USB device, run dmessage or lsblk, and that's going to show you the device. And you can see here what we've got is sudo dd if equals fedora live 64 38 1.6.iso of dev sdb, and obviously you need to make sure that you're actually writing to the correct drive. So replace sdb with whatever the output of the lsblk command was, and then we have the rest of the dd command here: bs equals 1 meg, status progress, conv no error, and sync. Now, once you've done that and you've created your USB device, what you're going to need to do is actually boot up into the USB live install. And usually you do this by pressing something like F12 on your device when the BIOS is coming up. On the Dell, when the big Dell symbol comes up, you press F12 a couple of times, and then in the menu you can boot up from the USB device. And the install is slightly different in that what happens is you basically set your keyboard and the drive you want to write to, and then what happens is it will boot into the actual desktop, and you finish the setup when you're in the desktop. So you enter your username, password, that sort of thing at that stage. So that's slightly different. So once you've got that set up and you're actually booted into the desktop, what you need to do is actually install the Nvidia drivers. So if I come across here, what you'll see is, if I come across, we got the Nvidia settings here, you can see. So we've got this all set up. So what we've got is Nvidia with CUDA set up, and this is important for some applications, things like OBS, so that you can use nvenc encoding, and also so that you can use MPV with hardware acceleration. So what you do is you come across to this page here, rpmfusion, and this has got the actual details and what you do. So what I'm going to do is just come across back to Emacs. So basically we've got three commands here. We run sudo dnf update -y. reboot if necessary. Then we install akmod Nvidia, xorg x11 drv Nvidia cuda, and then we reboot. And what that will do is that will install the latest Nvidia driver, and we're also running the I think it's 6.2 kernel. Let me just double check. Or 6.1. Where's the kernel? Yeah, 6.2, Linux kernel 6.2. And that's important because there were some issues with other distributions with the Linux 6 kernel and Nvidia drivers. So that's how you get up the Nvidia driver installed. Just 3 lines of code here to actually install Nvidia with CUDA support. Now the next thing is what we need to do is enable rpmfusion. Now Fedora basically ships with just free software. So the issue is that things like codecs are non-free. So what we have to do is enable extra repositories to pull in non-free software. So this is the rpmfusion configuration and installing the free and non-free repositories. So it's quite similar to Debian and Ubuntu based distributions where you have a sort of non-free repository as well. So these are the actual steps we need to go through to actually get this set up. So all we need to do is actually paste in this line of code here. And what that's going to do is actually, after you've done that, it's going to say, do you want to enable the free and non-free repositories? And you just press yes. Then after you've done that, what you need to do is run this command down here, sudo dnf group update core. So that's how we actually add the rpmfusion repositories. Now, after we've done that, what we need to do is actually install the codecs. So this is the page for installing the codecs, multimedia on Fedora, and I'll put links to all this under the video. So basically all I did was run these 2 commands here. So first one here, sudo dnf group update multimedia -- setop install weak dependencies equals false, exclude package kit gstreamer plugin. Now after you've done that, what you need to do is run sudo dnf group update sound and video. And what I presume that does is add your user to the sound and video groups. Usually when you set up a user on Linux, you'll be in the wheel group by default, and on some distributions what you have to do is manually add yourself to the video and audio groups as well. So I'm guessing that's what that command does. Now the next thing is the package manager is dnf. So you may be used to using apt on Ubuntu and Debian based distributions, and dnf is slightly different, and actually some ways I think is better. So if I, for example, if I run dnf search emacs and give it a second, what you see is we actually have a different kind of output. What happens is you usually get with apt you get a big long list. What happens with DNF is it will actually split stuff up, and it will say, okay, here's an exact match for the program you're searching for. You can see here it's listing all these other packages down here. Now what also happens that is nice is when you go through and install something, it will actually give you a list of the packages that are installed, and it's just formatted in quite a nice way that it's actually easier to read than the output of apt, which sometimes if you're searching for something, it will just give you hundreds and hundreds of packages and it's impossible to find anything. So what we're going to be doing is actually going through a little tweak you can do to the dnf.configuration file. And I was having a look on some YouTube videos about some of these settings, and there's some disagreement. There's an option you can do called fastest mirrors, which is supposed to basically increase your download speed, but some people are basically pointing out fastest doesn't equal most reliable. So I wouldn't change the fastest mirrors option. All we're going to do is actually add one extra option called max parallel downloads. We're going to set that to 5 by default. So we'll have a look at this file. So bat etc dnf.conf, and what you'll see here is this is the standard output, the standard config to line 8, and you can see here I've added a little comment, and line 10 here we've got max parallel downloads equals 5. There are I come across, did I make a note of this? There is a page with all the options that you can add to the DNF configuration file. And as I said, one of the ones that a lot of people use is fastest mirror equals true, but I haven't added that. And basically, to update, what you do is you just run sudo dnf update, just how you would using apt. And this is a list of the packages that I've actually installed. Another nice thing is the alacritty terminal is available in the repository. So, for example, you can't install alacritty on Ubuntu 22.04. It's not in the repositories. You try and build it, it will fail. And what happened was I was using Nix. Emacs wouldn't build. I got frustrated with the lack of documentation, switched back to Ubuntu, set everything up, tried to build alacritty, failed. So late at night I went through and deleted a load of packages and deleted the desktop. So at that point I thought, sod it, I'm not going to go back to Ubuntu, I'm going to try something new. And so I installed Fedora 37, and then a couple of days later Fedora 38 came out. So I'll also cover the actual upgrade process from Fedora 37 to Fedora 38. This is a list of the packages that I installed. And another nice thing is that the version of ffmpeg is version 6. So if I run ffmpeg, you'll see we have ffmpeg 6, which is really nice as well. I'm running Emacs 28.2, which is a GTK application. It's not a pure Wayland application. It's running under X Wayland. So we haven't got the 29 branch with pure GTK and native compile on Fedora, but that's a minor issue. So these are the packages I've installed. What I'm just going to do is go through and show you how you install OBS and some other general tips. So flatpak on Fedora is enabled by default, but what you need to do is add the flatpak repository so that you've got access to OBS Studio. So all you need to do is open a terminal, run flatpak remote add --user. I always use the --user option so that it installs flatpak in my home directory. It will create a directory called .var in your home directory. So that's what the --user option is. If not exists, flathub, and then add this repository. And then we install OBS with flatpak install --user flathub com.obs project.studio. And that's going to get you OBS installed and also installed with nvenc support so that you can use the nvenc encoder when you're recording videos with OBS Studio. Another nice thing is that ffmpeg is actually compiled with nvenc support as well. So that's another advantage. So that's how we get OBS Studio set up. So what I'm going to do now is actually mention setting up ZSH. And now typically this is what you would do. You run which ZSH after you've installed it. So on Fedora, yeah, that's the distribution we're using. We'd run sudo. Well, first of all, we'd search for ZSH. So dnf search ZSH. And what you'll see here is this is what I was saying about the format of the DNF output. What we've got here is name exactly match ZSH. So you can see, okay, that's probably what I want. That's probably the package I want. And then here are other packages where the name and the summary matched. So you can see we've got like auto jump, auto suggestions, syntax highlighting. So what we want to do is actually install ZSH and the ZSH syntax highlighting. You can install auto suggestions, but I tend not to use that. So we'd run sudo dnf install zsh syntax highlighting. So that's how you would install ZSH, right? Once you've got it installed, you'd run which ZSH to find out where it's installed, which is typically going to be user bin ZSH. So the next step that you would typically do is you'd run change shell -h user bin ZSH. I say normally do because on Fedora you actually have to install a package before you have access to that command. So the package that we actually need to install, if I can look through here, util-linux-user, this one at the end. Okay, so what you need to do is actually install Linux, util-linux-user. So you'd run sudo dnf install util-linux-user, util-linux-user. So once you've done that, you'll then have access to the change shell command. If you actually just run the change shell command without installing util-linux-user, as I've actually mentioned right above it, what will happen is you'll get a prompt saying this package isn't installed, do you want to install util-linux-user? So that's something I wanted to mention because that's a slight gotcha from regular Linux distributions. So that's how you set up ZSH. So the next thing I'm actually going to cover is SSH, all the H's. So what we want to be able to do is add our SSH password and have it available to us when we log in. So we don't want to have to do ssh-add every time we log in and put in our SSH password. So on Fedora, there is no seahorse installed. So what do I mean by seahorse? Passwords and keys. So this is the passwords and keys application. There is also no systemd service set up for your SSH keys. One way you can sort of do this manually is you have to, like, in the terminal you run evaluate shush sort of PID to create the PID, and then you can run ssh-add, and it's a pain. I'm going to take you through the easy way. I say easy way. What we're going to do is create a systemd user service called ssh-agent.service. So in config systemd user ssh-agent service. So do that. Hang on. So config systemd user ssh-agent service. And in this file, we got this bit of code here. We got the unit, description, shush key agent, service type forking, environment, shush auth socket, shush agent socket, exec start, shush agent, install wanted default target. So what we do is we create that file like that. And then what we do is we enable the shush agent. We run systemctl-user enable shush agent service. And then we start it. The next thing that we do is we actually install Seahorse. So password and keys is actually called Seahorse. And this is the graphical application you can see here, password and keys. And this lets you manage your GPG keys, your shush keys, that sort of thing. And what happens is this is automatically unlocked at login using when you log in with your login password, and then these keys are available automatically without you having to do ssh-add every time. So basically what you do is you run sudo dnf install Seahorse. Now what you want to do is actually use a application that's going to prompt you for your shush password. So for instance, once I got all this set up, what I did was using Magic in Emacs, I pushed some code to GitHub. And what happens is when you actually do that, when you go to do the push, what will happen is you'll get a dialog box floating up created by GNOME. It's not an Emacs dialog box, it's a GNOME dialog box saying, please enter your shush password. And it will have a little checkbox in the bottom left hand corner saying automatically unlock at login. You tick that and you click OK. And what happens then is that then sets it up with Seahorse password and keys so that your shush password is automatically added to that keychain and unlocked at login. So that's how you set up the shush key. Again, a couple of steps. We created the file, we added the code, we enabled the service. So enabling it creates a symbolic link so that it runs basically at every login. So we enable it and then we start it. Install shush, Seahorse. Then run an application that's going to prompt you for your SSH password. And what you want to do is before you actually do the push in Emacs or something, make sure to copy your SSH password to the clipboard, because the dialog box that comes up steals focus and doesn't allow you to switch windows, copy something. You have to sort of basically, if you haven't copied the password to your clipboard, you've run this, just cancel it, copy the password, do it again. When you get the little box come up, paste it in and check the little box saying add it to your sort of login keyring to automatically be unlocked. So that's SSH. Again, there is no password and keys installed by default on Fedora. So next thing we're going to do is look at the firewall. And why do we want to look at the firewall? Transmission. So this is another thing. Transmission 4. We've got the latest version of transmission, and it's been completely rewritten. I've given it a little outing, and the download speeds were ridiculous. Double the speeds I was getting with the previous version. I was getting like up to 1.9. Yeah, I was getting much better download speeds than with transmission 3. So I've got this enabled with a dark theme here, and one thing I'm going to come across and mention is that by default it wasn't picking up the dark theme. So what I'm going to do is come across here and go to GNOME tweaks, which you can install. Let me find out what the name of the package was just while I'm here. Did I write it down? I thought I did. Tweaks. No, I didn't, so I'll have to add that. But let me just find out what the name of the package is, because I'm not sure if it was GNOME tweaks or not. Yeah, it is. So GNOME tweaks. So sudo dnf install GNOME tweaks. And what you want to do is open up GNOME tweaks and come to appearance. And what you need to do, come down to this section here, legacy applications, and set that to add way to dark. And by default, that's not going to be set. I don't know why you need to do that. Why Transmission 4 is a GTK application, so it should pick up the dark mode, but it wasn't. But all you need to do, install GNOME tweaks, come to legacy applications, add way to dark. Once you do that, you'll have transmission in a dark mode. Now, by default, what it's going to look like is this. It's going to have this kind of toolbar where you have these big ugly buttons. And then what you also have is this thing where you can filter the torrents, like active downloading, that kind of thing. But what you can do is just come in here and turn those ugly buttons off, because they're actually replicated in the menu anyway. So all those things are replicated in the menu. If you don't really use this, you can disable that as well. So disable the filter bar, and you probably want to set this to sort by progress. That's what I do. So that's transmission, and what we're going to do is just come across here and go to the preferences, and I've just left this pretty much at the default. The other thing is you'll get desktop notifications when torrents are added or completed, and I didn't like it with getting notification when torrents added, because I've just added it, so I know that I've done it. So I'll go to that section. So automatically add files from downloads. I uncheck the show torrent options dialog box. What that does is whenever you add a torrent, you'll get a sort of dialog box coming up showing you which files are in it, and you can deselect them and stuff. But it's annoying because if you're adding a lot of torrents, you'll keep getting that box come up, and it gets annoying very quickly. So uncheck that option. You can also play around with this, move torrent files to the trash and save to location. You can play around with all these. You can set the seeding ratio, privacy, network. What I do is uncheck these ones and just manually set the port. So I'm mentioning this because this is the port that we're actually going to open. And you always get this status unknown with transmission. You have done for years. When you do test port, it will still fail. Now you've got the port open. Let me just finish this tea. Right, so we got the port set, so that's the port we're actually going to be using. And desktop, this is where the notifications are set. So by default, this is going to be, all three of these are going to be checked. So showing notifications when torrents are added, you don't need that because you've just added it. So why do you need to be notified of something you've just done? That doesn't make any sense. Having a notification when the torrent finishes, that's nice. And I don't want to play a sound when the torrent finishes. And the remote is where you can set up access for the web UI. So you can also run transmission in a web browser. So you connect to the daemon. This is where you would allow access, set the port, set authentication, that sort of thing. And what you can also do is you can create a netrc file, which you put in your home directory. It's called .netrc, and you can put in the options you set here so that you can use them, so that you can actually connect to transmission from command line applications when you have authentication enabled using the netrtc file. So this is the port that we're going to open, 6881. So what I'm going to do is actually show you the firewall setup on Fedora. So let's come down to the firewall. So the firewall is using something called nf tables. So normally on things like Ubuntu and Debian, that sort of thing, you'll be used to using IP tables. And maybe a graphical application like GUFW, that's another, that's a UFW firewall. So this uses NFT tables, which is a Red Hat thing. And this works with a concept of zones. So you have like home, work, office, you know, that kind of thing. So what we can do is actually list the zones. Okay, so this is the list of zones that there are. You can see we've got Fedora server, workstation, block, DMZ, drop, external home, internal, libvirt rooted. So these are for virtual machines. That's another nice thing of Fedora. Fedora comes with GNOME boxes and is automatically set up with QEMU and libvirt for virtual machines. So that's nice. So these are all the zones that we got. So what is the current zone we're using? So what we have to do is figure out what the actual zone is, so we can list all the zones. What we want to do is get the active zones, and that basically means the current sort of networking zone we're working with, the current, because you can have different zones and each one can have different firewall options, which is quite a nice thing. So the current zone that we're using is called Fedora Workstation. So that's going to be the default zone that we're going to be working with. And you can see here it's actually showing you the interface that is being managed by that. So what we need to do, we've got our active zone. We can run this other command here. So sudo firewall command -- zone equals Fedora Workstation. That's how you list the zone, and then we've got list all. And what we've got here is it's basically saying, okay, it's active, it's default, sort of some basic stuff about what's set up. So what we need to do is actually we'll list the services. Okay, so this is sort of like listing the kind of built-in services that are sort of available or enabled rather. And what we're going to do is actually allow and deny by port. So the way we do this is by running sudo firewall -command -- permanent. And I should have actually changed this to this text here to what the actual thing was. So the current zone is Fedora. So let me just change this documentation because I got it from somewhere else. So what we need to do, let's put this in. Let's change this. Okay, so what we do is we run sudo firewall command permanent. So we're permanently adding something. We specify the zone. Okay, zone Fedora Workstation, that's the current zone. We do add port, and then the port, and then / and then the protocol, like UDP or TCP. So what I've done is just opened 6881 for both UDP and TCP for the transmission torrent client. Once you do that, it's going to basically say success. What you can then do is actually list the ports, see if that works. Yeah, so it's basically listing what's open here. And then to remove these, this is how you would remove the actual ports you've just added. Let me just change this. And so this is how you actually removed the actual port. Sudo firewall command permanent zone Fedora Workstation, and then you do -- remove port. So you've got two syntaxes, so it's easy to remember. You've got add port and remove port. So that's pretty obvious, and I'll just push this up. So when you're doing, you see how I just pushed that repository up. When you're setting up SSH, when you're actually pushing it up to GitHub, that's when you'll get the prompt coming up to add your SSH thingy. So that's a lot of the setup. So what I'm going to do is actually, this is the documentation that I was just actually going through here. So I'll put a link to this. So let me just go through and sort of make sure there's nothing I've missed. So the other thing I want to do is actually cover MPV. So here's boxes. I was saying this is the GNOME sort of virtual machine manager, basically, that comes set up with Fedora. So on Fedora, you actually get a blank version of GNOME. You get a vanilla version of GNOME. So what I want to actually do is come through and show you two things. One, how you can uninstall applications using the Software Center, and also how you update from, say, Fedora 37 to Fedora 38. So this is the sort of Software Center updates, that sort of thing. And it's really easy to use. What I wanted to mention is, by default, you'll have a lot of other GNOME applications installed, like Calculator, Cheese, LibreOffice, document scanner, and things you might not want. So I'm just going to show you how you uninstall them. So what you do is you just come across to installed. Say I wanted to uninstall boxes or whatever, you just click the uninstall button, and it says, do you want to install it? And you just click OK. So once you've got Fedora set up and you want to get rid of some of those pre-installed GNOME applications that you don't want, Cheese, those kind of things, just come through to the install tab and just uninstall them. So the next thing I want to cover is actually the update section here. When you're on Fedora 37 and you want to update to Fedora 38, what you need to do is actually come to this updates page, and what you'll see is a big section here saying Fedora 38 download. Don't click that straight away. What you need to do is actually make sure that you haven't got any outstanding updates before you install Fedora 38. So as I said, if you've installed 37 and you want to update to 38, come to the updates. You'll see a big install, Fedora 38. What you need to do first of all is click the refresh button. Give it, 30 seconds. What you'll see is a section underneath it saying available updates. And it will say like system updates and then like Firefox or something like that. So what you do is you first install those updates and then you reboot. Once you've rebooted, come back into the Software Center, the updates, you'll see Fedora 38. Just click the refresh button again, make sure there's nothing outstanding. Once you've done that, just click the install Fedora 38. Give it an hour, and you'll basically be rebooted into Fedora 38. And that's actually the recommended way of upgrading, doing a quick little search. So no terminal commands to learn, so it's really, really easy to upgrade. Just come in, make sure you've done all the updates, click the update button. Took about an hour for me, and you'll be updated. So this is basically all the applications you can install, but I just wanted to show you two things. One, how you manually uninstall the GNOME things, and two, how you do the updates. You'll also get updates in here for things like firmware updates. So I had a firmware update. I ran it. It updated my BIOS. Did a firmware update. Everything worked perfectly. No issues with that. So that's the updates. Next, what I want to do is come through and go through MPV and some other applications. So as you can see here, these are just the some of the default applications that come with GNOME, disks, image viewer, document viewer, password and keys. That's Seahorse. We have to add that manually. We also had to install GNOME tweaks, and again, you want that so that you can go into the appearance, legacy applications, and turn that to a way to dark for transmission. Then we just got sort of other stuff here. I left the default terminal here, but just in case alacritty doesn't, stops working or whatever, it's always good to have a fallback. The other thing I'm going to do is actually cover Emacs now. So Emacs, the version of Emacs that we've got is Emacs 28.2. As I said, this is not a pure GTK application. It's not running under Wayland, using X-Wayland. And the way I know that is because I installed the XLS clients, which is an application that will show you which applications are running under Wayland or using X-Wayland. So this is Emacs 28.2. The one thing that we actually need to do as a setup is we need to create a desktop application for the Emacs client. So as you can see here, we've got coming across into utilities. We've got here Emacs. We've got a desktop launcher for Emacs, but by default, it doesn't create a desktop application launcher for the Emacs client, which is what we want. So the way we fix that is we come across to local share applications, and what you'll see here is we have emacsclient.desktop. And if I come in here, what you'll see is we have the desktop entry name Emacs client. And you can see down here what it's doing is we're running exec Emacs client -c F. And what the -c option means is create a new frame if it doesn't exist, kind of thing. So that's what we need to do. We need to create the emacs.desktop file. Put links to this for you. And we put that in local share applications. Once we've done that, we will then have a desktop launcher for the Emacs client. And what I like to do is if I come across to these settings and keyboard. So this is the GNOME settings, and what you do is you come across to keyboard, view and customize keyboard shortcuts. And what you'll see here is this is where you can modify all the keyboard shortcuts for different options, basically. And you can also modify these using dconf or G settings. Some of them don't work with G settings and dconf. You've got to manually come in here and set them. But the important thing, what I'll do is actually I'll just go through some of the things I set here and then show you the custom shortcuts so that you can actually add a keyboard shortcut to launch the Emacs client. That's another thing. Before I do that, while my memory fails me, you want to speed up GNOME, make it faster. So what am I talking about? So as you can see here, when I'm switching windows, you can see that's quick, yeah? I come across to accessibility. Where is it? I'm pretty sure it's in accessibility. There's a section where you actually, it just changed now. There's a section where you actually disable the animation. Yeah, reduce animation, yeah. So this has obviously sort of changed since I actually last looked at it, but what you want to do, if I turn this off, now I change. Can you see the difference? You see how now every time I'm changing windows, look like this. Oh, come on, seriously. So come into accessibility, reduce animation, right? And then when I switch keyboard, see how much faster that is? Yeah. So with it off, Jesus. Turn that on. Bang, 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 bang. Much better. Okay. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. So that leads me onto the keyboard and the customized shortcut. So what I'm going to do is actually come through. So accessibility, launchers. So what I typically do is this is where you can set keyboard shortcuts to launch things. So when you set Firefox to be your default browser, and by default it's the only browser installed on Fedora, this is where you can come in. You can come into launchers, launch web browser, and set a keyboard shortcut, which I set to Alt Super Return. Then we got navigation. And typically what I do is I set this here. So what I'll do is I'll just actually come across to this, and this is where I set okay. Yeah. So let me just show you GNOME. Okay, so this is where I typically set my keyboard shortcuts. So I use HJKNL and super key. So super 1, which is to workspace 1, super 2 to workspace 2. And then I can move windows using super shift 1, super shift 2 to move windows to a specific workspace. And also super shift H and super shift L to move windows to another display. So if I want to move this window to display on the right, I just press super shift H and then super shift L to move it back. And toggle in full screen super S. So what I'm going to do is actually come through. Basically what I do is you can ignore these dash to dock ones because dash to dock is not actually installed by default on GNOME. That's something Ubuntu adds, whereas on Fedora you get vanilla GNOME. So what I do is I run these commands in the terminal, this one, not the dash to dock, but all the rest of these. And what that does is that unbinds some default key bindings so that I can then use these keyboard shortcuts I've set up to easily switch across. But sometimes what you need to do is actually, sometimes using G settings, some of these don't take and you've got to come through and manually set them. So this is, you can see here, move window 1 to the left, 1 to the right. And this is where you need to come in, move window to workspace 1, 2, 3, 4. So shift super 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch application. So what I do is I bind super J and super K to actually bring up the heads up display like that. By default it's super and tab or super and shift tab, but super and shift tab is a really awkward command to try and use with your left hand. So just using super J and K, bring up this is much better. And the reason why you want to use this to switch windows is because you want to use the heads up to actually switch windows, is because when you switch windows by using super 1, 2, 3, 4 to switch to the workspace, the application doesn't have focus. So if I switch to the browser here, what happens is it doesn't actually have focus by default. So what can happen is you'll switch to workspace top, start typing, but it'll actually be another application that's got focus. So you always want to switch using the heads up display because it switches to the application and gives it focus. So that's really important. So these are some of the keyboard shortcuts down here. Okay, and sound and media. What you also want to do is come across to sound and media, play pause and set that to Alt Super Space. That's what I do. And what I'm also going to do is actually show you, you need to set up MPV and install MPV with Empress. And what that does is that allows you to play and pause videos that are playing in the browser, but also in MPV using this keyboard shortcut. So you can just hit a keyboard shortcut and pause a video when it's not actually currently focused. So that's sound and media. And I'll go through and show you my MPV setup as well. So sound and media system, I disable the lock screen button in case I accidentally lock stuff. I also disable the restoring the keyboard shortcuts because I don't want to go through and set up all the keyboard shortcuts and then accidentally delete them all. Also, what I like to do is show all apps. I bind that to Control Super P, which is keyboard shortcut. It's commonly used with things like Rofi. So I've just got that muscle memory, and I disable the overview there. So that was the system. Typing Windows. Okay, I like to set the close window to Shift Super C. So when I press Shift Super C, it's going to automatically close the window. Another thing to note here is that actually on Fedora, the minimize, you only get the close button by default. You don't get the 3 buttons. Just something I thought I'd mention as it occurred to me. And also toggle full screen mode. So typically, you're going to press F12 to actually toggle application full screen. So you can see here, I can't do it now because this is got focus, but you can see this isn't full screen. Whereas if I come across here, that's maximized, now it's full screen. So instead of pressing F12, you have to take your fingers off the keyboard, press a function key. Super S is much more convenient. So the way I'm setting this up is so that I don't have to do as little hand movement as possible. So we've got the HJK keys and we just use Super S to toggle full screen. So that's really convenient. So these are the custom shortcuts. Alacritty, Control Super Space, emacsclient, Control Super Return, and XMPV, Control Super X, and that's basically a script I use so that MPV will play the current URL on the clipboard full screen on the second display. So I'll sort of go through and show you that. But basically all you need to do, in here, for example, for Emacs, what you want to do is put name emacsclient and the command emacsclient-c. That's it. So once you've done that, you see I've got emacsclient there. You can see Emacs scratch is ready, little notification. So that's some set up for the keyboard. Let's see what else. We've got Wi-Fi network, Bluetooth appearance. Add your picture, set dark mode. Notification. That's another thing I want to mention. Really, 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 really annoying is Emacs with an audio bell. Okay, so like in Emacs, what will happen is sometimes you'll, do something and try and autocomplete a name that's not there, and every time you do that, it goes beep, 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 and it was driving me nuts. So what we do is come into Emacs, init.el. So sometimes these things just like occur to me as I'm looking at something else, and then I better show you that. So bell, was it bell? Yeah, disable the ring bell. So this is what you want to do. In your Emacs init.el, init does sound a bit common, but there you go. Just saying. Seq ring dash bell dash function comma, was the hanging comma, whatever they're called, single quote, that's the one. Ignore. So seq ring bell function, comma, not comma, single quote, ignore. And what you can do is come across here and press at the end of the line Control X, Control E to evaluate that, and that will get rid of the ring bell function. But that was something that was driving me absolutely potty because I couldn't see a way to actually delete that. So this is the notifications. You can see here sound alerts is actually turned on, and so I could have just turned it off in there, I guess. But that's how you actually do it in Emacs. So these are some of the notifications that will sort of show up. I don't know if just turning the sound alerts off would have worked, but that's the way I did it in Emacs. That's just another thing I wanted to mention. Search, you can turn off a lot of search things so you don't get littered with results for characters and things like that. Multitasking, you can pretty much leave as default. So sound, Pipewire is enabled by default. So that's another really good thing. Pipewire is set up, and what I'm going to do is actually also show you MPD and MPV, setting those up to use Pipewire as well. Power. What I do is I always come in here and I just turn this dim screen thing off because it's really annoying. It just like dims your screen. And I set screen blank to never, because I don't want the screen blanking when I'm plugged into power. So that's another thing there. Displays, we've got display there. I haven't tried the night light. There were issues before that I'm aware of with the night light not working with Nvidia graphics cards, so didn't try that. Mouse and keypad. So mouse, and you want traditional scrolling, yeah, not this Apple nonsense, natural scrolling. And come across to the touchpad, and touchpad, scroll method, 2-finger, traditional. So you can come in here and set that up. So that's just something else to be aware of. Just thinking, nothing else in here. Okay, default apps. You can see this is where it's going to set the default apps for stuff. So, for example, music and video are set to be opened with MPV, and about will basically show you the setup. So you can see here what the setup is, and we've got Fedora 38, GNOME version 44 running Wayland, Linux 6.2 kernel with the Nvidia graphics card. So what we're going to do now is have a look at some other stuff. So let me come into my config directory so I can actually go through. That's another thing. Luckily my cursor's on this because this is something else that bugs me. XDG desktop. What do I mean? Let me come across here. Files. So typically, this is the new Nautilus file manager where they've actually. I think you've got this new. I thought there was a way you could change the sort of collapsible folder thingy. Okay, so these are XDG desktop directories, and typically you'll have another two here called public and templates, which you don't use. Nobody uses them that I know of, and they're just annoying. So the question is, how do you get rid of them? Oh, well, you just delete them, don't you? Oh, yeah, that's easy. But of course, what happens is when you do that, you reboot, they actually get automatically created again. So there is actually two methods for doing this, and the one I actually used on Ubuntu doesn't work. What you can do is actually add a line under here that says enabled equals false with a capital F. And when you do that, it's supposed to stop the automatic creation of some of these directories, but it wasn't working. So what I actually had to do was, it said what you can normally do is do enabled equals false, and then you'd come through and you'd delete these public and templates directory. That solution wasn't working on Fedora. So what you got to do, instead of deleting this XDG templates and public share, what you do is you set them to home. So home /home/. Once you've done that, what you can do is you can delete those public and templates directories, and when you reboot, they won't be created again. The other thing that you can do with this is you can actually change the paths to stuff. So if you want to have, you don't want to have a videos directory, or you want to have videos directory that's actually on another drive or something like that, you can actually set that in here. So that's what you need to do. Come across into this .config user-directories dirs and set the templates and public share to home / and then delete the directories, and when you reboot then it's going to be restarted. So what I'm going to do is actually just come across through some of these things. We got alacritty here. Right, that's another thing I want to mention, alacritty. Okay, so what you see here, I'm going to just actually come out. With alacritty, what you can do is you can edit the config file, and alacritty will be updated in real time. So what I'm going to do is actually take this option out. Oops. Oh, what the you can see how ugly this is. So this is what alacritty looks like by default. There's an issue with alacritty and gnome and client-side decorations, and this is why you don't have a proper gnome title bar and stuff. And so this is what it looks like, and it's horrific. It's bad. So what we need to do is undo what I just undid. So what you want to do is add, under the Windows section here, decorations, none. What's happened now is, because I've deleted that, it's now got only one window. So let me move this to Windows 2. Okay. So what you'll see here is adding that decorations none option. What that does is that moves that horrific monstrosity of a title bar. And what we now have is this. And then the other thing I want to do is, you can see how this is open bang in the middle of the window. What we want to do is actually come across to GNOME tweaks, come across to Windows. So GNOME tweaks, Windows, center new Windows, turn that on, because by default what happens is Windows are by default created up in the top left, and it's annoying because you want to have it focused here. So what I do is I set it to have no borders or anything like that. So how do you move this window? Press the super key and just click, move it, okay? So we've now got alacritty set up, so what we can do is we can press super S, and you'll see it's now gone full screen, super S. Okay, so that's alacritty. That's something that we really want to set up. I also set it up to be windowed mode. So the startup, you've got things like you can set it to be maximized, windowed, or full screen. I think there was actually, last time I checked, there was an issue with maximized, and then what it would do is maximize the width but not the height. So it would kind of like get half a terminal. So the other issue is you can set it to be full screen, but then it's difficult to maximize out of it because by default it's full screen. So what you want to do is set it to be windowed, decorations none, startup mode windowed, and what it's going to do is it will start up like this, then just super S, full screen it, and the advantage of that is you can come back out, whereas if you start at full screen you can't come back out because the default size was full screen, so you're not switching back, you know, you're toggling back and forth. So that's alacritty. We've got the font config here, Fedora code, colors, that's solarized. So really short config there, 64 lines, but those are the important things. The other thing that you want to probably do is set the term to xterm256 color. And the reason for that is because a lot of other machines that you might SSH into won't have a it's called a tick, you know, like I forget what the thing is called, but basically you have like a database of terminals and how they work. And if you set the term to alacritty, when you SSH into another machine and start typing, all sorts of weird stuff will happen. You'll get double characters, spacing, and all weird kind of stuff. Another workaround is you can actually keep the term as alacritty, but when you SSH into another machine, what you do is you start tmux on your local machine and set the tmux term to something like, you know, xterm256 color, and then SSH into the machine, and you'll be all right. We've got the window padding here, so that's another thing we want, so that the text isn't butted up. So that's alacritty. That's a couple of things you want to do, so you don't have that horrific border there. So ARIA2, so this is just my config for ARIA2, nothing special to look in there. Auto start, what I do is I actually disable GNOME notification to use the Emacs desktop notification server. So I have a desktop entry here that calls a script called no GNOME notifications. So no. And basically all this does is it just runs pkill-f org.gnome shell notifications. So every time I boot in, what happens, the auto start desktop file here calls that script there, and it kills GNOME shell notifications. And what that does is then I can use the Emacs desktop notification center so that I get notifications in Emacs instead of GNOME. Okay, we've got Emacs here. So I think I showed you everything that's important, but let me just have a quick go through here. So this is my Emacs. What we've got here is packages, selected packages. So you basically just put the packages in, you know, you want to install, or it does it automatically when you add packages. So that once you go to another machine, you can do package install selected packages. And it will install all these packages. But what you need to do is you need to actually open Emacs and not emacsclient when you first install Emacs, and it will prompt you to install everything. The other thing that you need to do is, you can see down here I've got all these nice fonts with the Doom mode line. What you need to do is install all the icons package. Once you've done that, what you also need to do is run mx all the icons install fonts. Okay, so if you're using Doom mode line, what you do is you install all the icons. Once you've done that, you'll find all they're not there. It's all broken. You have like squares. What you need to do is run all the icons install fonts, and that will install all the fonts, so you get everything working down there. Okay, anything else? Yeah. Okay, that brings me to another thing. You see, the way my brain's working is not ordered. Another issue. Okay, let me come down to this. Not in Emacs, it's in my ZSH. That's what it is. Okay. ZSH, EMV, and RC. What I want to talk about is bin directories. So what you can do is you can have a bin directory in your home. Of course, you've got user bin, which is where everything gets installed. Now, there's a distinction between the bin directory in your home and user local bin. User local bin is where typically you need to add scripts that require elevated privileges that you run with sudo or doas. Okay, if you can put a script that requires sudo and doas in your home bin, you'll have issues that say I can't find it, can't find this command, can't run it, this kind of crap. So the issue with Fedora is you've got user local bin. Okay, great. So you can put scripts in there, and let me come across tmux. Yeah. So in user local bin, I've got two scripts here. One which basically takes a disk image that's encrypted with LUKS and then mounts it to my mount directory in my home where I keep passwords and stuff. And the other one is for starting a VPN, basically. Both these scripts need to be run with sudo or doas. So the issue is what happens is when you put the script in the user local bin directory, what will happen is you'll try and run the script name. So you can see here I can run the script name, it will work. What happens by default is you try and run a script you put in user local bin, it will say it won't, first of all, it won't autocomplete, and secondly, you just type it out manually, press return, and it will say can't find the script. And you're thinking, but it's in user local bin, it should be able to find it. There's a bit of setup we need to do. Two things. We need to firstly edit our zsh-env file, and what we need is a section like this where we're going to set the path. So we're setting the path to home bin. We're also adding user local bin to our path. Okay, that's the first step. And what this typeset-u path thing does is it makes sure that the path is unique and doesn't have any duplicates in it, basically. So that's the first step we need to do. We need to actually add user local bin to our path, because otherwise what happens is you actually have to run sudo user local bin and then the name of the script, which is lame. You don't have to do that. So this fixes that one part of it. The next part is our zsh-rc file, and this is the secret source down here. This section, zsh auto completion for sudo and doas, z style completion. What you can see here is we've got sudo, su, and doas, command path, user local bin. So these two things in combination, firstly adding user local bin to our path, and then setting this zsh completion for sudo and doas with this path. What that then allows us to do, instead of having to run sudo user, see how annoying this would be, user local bin, the path of the script, we can now run the script. It works. Okay, so that's really important, and that's the reason why that's really important is because you will have two types of scripts: your regular scripts and ones that need to be run with sudo. You can't put the ones that require sudo in your bin directory in your home, because that's not going to work. By default, it's not set up. It uses bash. So it may work on bash, but I'm using ZSH, and I showed you how you had to set up the ZSH. You had to run install the util-linux-users thing before you could run, change shell. But anyway, on ZSH, this was a issue, and it's really annoying, and that's how you basically fix it. Two things. ZSH-env, so two parts. Setting the path equals home bin, user local bin, or path. Second part in our zsh-rc file, we got the completion for sudo su and doas, command path, user local bin. Those two things together fix the problem. Okay, so anything else in my ZSH while I'm here? No. This is where I set the alias for MPC, and I'll get onto MPC. So let me just go back to the config directory, just work my way through stuff. Okay, so we've got MPD and MPV. down here. So MPD, what you need to do is create the .config MPD directory, and what you have to do is actually create these files. So you create mpd.db log pd state sticker.sql and also this socket file. So what you just do is run touch, basically you do something like this. First of all, you create the directory if it doesn't exist, mpd.config mpd, create the directory, and then you'd run touch .config mpd, and this is how you do multiple things. You do like mpd.db comma db rather comma, go through all those things, and socket. That's how you chain multiple things together with a comma inside curly braces, and it will create those files. So then we've got the mpd.config, and you can see the important thing. What we've got here is the music directory, and what we're doing is here we're specifying the db file, the log, this kind of stuff, bind to address. This is the important thing, bind to address, mpd socket. What we're going to be doing is creating a systemd file to start MPD using a socket. And the other thing you want down here is audio output pipewire. So that's the gist of the thing. We've got the bind to address, and we've got pipewire set down there. So what we'll do is we'll just come into systemd and have a look at the MPD service. So this is the MPD systemd file. Okay, and I think I may have something in my zsh-env as well. zsh-env, I'm pretty sure I set my socket. Yeah, that's the other thing that you can do. See here, in zsh-env, what you can do is export mpd host equals, and then what you do is you put in the path of the socket. And the important thing here is you have to put in the full path, and you can't use the home variable. You can't use $home. You've got to put in the full path. So that's going to set up the socket. So let's come back into .config. So that's setting up MPD. Also in ncmpc, what we do is we specify the host as the socket. So what that does is when I start ncmpc, what you'll see here is Q on and the path to the socket. Okay, so that's how we get MPD and NPC set up with pipewire and systemd. So we've got MPV and yt-dlp is the other things we want to go through. So there's actually a sort of a bug with MPV and yt-dlp. yt-dlp is using the back end to get the links, and currently there's a bug between the latest version of yt-dlp and MPV where it will basically fail to play the audio. It will play just the video track without the audio, and the way that you fix that is this section in here, and that actually covered another video. What you do is put in no-yt-dlp, and what you have to do then is have this script here, this yt-dl_hook.lua file. And what that does is it basically uses that file instead of yt-dlp to play videos. So that's just an issue with MPV. We've got the input.conf here. This is where you set your key bindings for MPV. I've got vim key bindings set up. And we've also got this thing down here that I covered in the previous video where you can press a keyboard shortcut and it will allow you to run a ffmpeg equalizer on the audio, basically. So you can actually put in ffmpeg commands. You can see we've got super equalizer and loud norm, that kind of stuff. So you can actually just press a keyboard shortcut in MPV and basically it'll bring up this menu here. F1 will bring up the menu, so it'll say F2 loud norm, F3 dear norm, low bass, low treble. You just press one of those keyboard shortcuts, and this down here is the actual timeout, how long the text appears on the MPV screen. MPV, yeah, okay, so this is the MPV config, and what we've got is different profiles. So what we got here is profile hardware decoding. You can see here, this is the video out. And so basically what happens is this is going to use CUDA. So this is going to use hardware acceleration. There were some bit of hoo-ha about Fedora and VAPI and not being able to play videos with hardware acceleration, but this only applies to the non-free drivers. So if you're using the proprietary drivers, which are much better, and you actually need for some things, you're not going to have an issue. So don't worry about all that VAPI stuff. That only applies to the the open source drivers, and you can install rpmfusion anyway. So it's going to install all the codecs. But if you're on using the proprietary drivers, it's not an issue. You get hardware acceleration. So this is the config for the hardware acceleration. So that's everything there. I think that's pretty much most of the stuff. I can't think of anything else offhand. Let me just go through, do a roundup, make sure I've not missed anything. Another nice thing here actually is this is the new GNOME 44, whatever you want to call it, just toggled all the things on and off. And you've got a new thing here, which is, I'm not going to press now because it might interfere with OBS, but it's a screen recording thing, and you can actually specify a area of the screen to snap, but also record. So you can actually record stuff on Wayland just using the built-in thing, and actually record just a section of the screen. So that's something that's nice. Let me just go through to see if there's anything else I've missed. So we went through alacritty, how to turn that horrible border off, emacsclient, how to turn the bell off, MPV. We set up OBS with flatpak. We set up transmission. We opened the port. We changed it to a dark theme. Yeah, the other thing, we covered the software center and actually uninstalling the applications, and also upgrading. So that was nice and easy. I can't think if there's anything else I've missed down here. Anything else I installed? We set up password and keys so that we've got SSH and GPG automatically our keyring unlocked when we log in, so we don't have to do ssh-add, and we set up the system D. So let me just check there's nothing in the system D I've missed. .config system D. So we set up NPD and the shush agent service. So that was all that taken care of. We set up ZSH. Is there anything else? We also set up the user directories here. Remember, we moved the templates and public share by setting them to home /. So what else is there? Anything else I've missed? I think that's pretty much most of the stuff. Let me just come back to my notes. Okay, so basically recap. We created the drive. I'll put links to this document. We downloaded, the ISO, we ran lsblk or dmessage. We DD'd it to the USB thing. You plug it in F12 a couple of times on the keyboard when the Dell logo's coming up or whatever your logo is. We selected boot from that. In the installer, it says it's different. You basically go through, select your keyboard and the drive you want to do. The nice thing is btrfs. So we're getting btrfs by default, which is nice, because trying to set up ZFS on Linux is a pain. It was actually easier on Ubuntu, but they've kind of removed some of the features that allowed you to do that. So we're using btrfs instead, which is nice. We set up the Nvidia driver, sudo dnf update-y, installed akmod-nvidia. The next important thing was we installed xorg-xlib-drv-nvidia-cuda, and that's for CUDA, nvenc, and nvenc support. So we get nvenc support in OBS Studio for MPV players, so we've got hardware acceleration, but also in ffmpeg. So we get CUDA support, nvenc support in ffmpeg. The other thing was we had to add the rpmfusion repository, which we just did with this bit of code here. Once we did that, it says, yeah, install the free and non-free repos. After we did that, we run sudo dnf group update core. After we did that, we run this bit of code here to actually install all the non-free codecs. Once we did that, we ran sudo dnf group update sound dash and dash video. Okay. We edited the etc dnf.conf file, and we added max parallel downloads equals 5. If you've got a faster connection, you can increase that. Again, I didn't use the fastest mirror option because there's some kind of dispute about, you know, whether that's a good idea or not. You can update stuff running sudo dnf update. This was some of the packages I've installed. So alacritty, emacs. Yeah, this is the other one I wanted to mention. MPV and MPV-empress. Empress will allow you to control MPV using the keyboard shortcuts to play and pause video. So that's important to set. You want yt-dlp. You also want yt-dlp-zsh completion. And so that's going to give you complete yt-dlp zsh completions. Zsh, bit of a mouthful. ZSH syntax highlighting, tmux, got things like abook, apg for generating passwords, aria2 is for downloading. It's basically a download that will sort of open multiple connections to download stuff faster. A-spell, we've got fd-find. So fd-find is a Rust version of the find command. Fira code, fcf, ImageMagick. Interesting, this one, it's the only one that is actually capitalized. So I was actually searching for ImageMagick and there was nothing there. And the reason is because it's actually spelt capital I image and then capital M magic. So that's another thing to point out that is a bit of a gotcha. If you're just searching for ImageMagick, it's not going to show up unless you type it like that, basically. And we've got MPC, MPD, MUT, and NCMPC, Newsboat, OAuth tool. That's an application to create two-factor authentication passwords. Open doas, that's doas. So that's the doas alternative sudo. Pandoc for converting text documents. Ripgrep, got shell check, surfraw, tmux, task-spooler. So task spooler is a command that will allow you to queue up commands to be executed sequentially one after another. Transmission, URL scan, W3M, xclip, and the important one was util-linux-users. And again, that's what you need to install so that you've got the change shell command, so you can change the shell to ZSH, because the default shell on Fedora is bash. After that, we've got flatpak. So this is how we installed the flatpak repo. Let me just bring that down a line. So flatpak remote add that, then flatpak install OBS. And then we had ZSH, and again, we needed to install the util-linux-user. The one change shell -h user bin ZSH. For ZSH, put SSH rather. What we did was we created the shush agent service. We added the following code. We enabled it, and we started it. We installed Seahorse. Then we ran a program like Magic, push something up to GitHub. We get the little prompts coming up. Make sure you've got your password copied to the clipboard. You paste in the command and check the little box. Automatically unlock shush, ZSH shush. Automatically unlock your shush password at login. So that's the other thing we did. And then we had the firewall. So again, the firewall using nf table. So this is how we went through. We had to get the active zone, sudo firewall command, get active zones. Once we found the active zones, what we did was run sudo firewall command, permanent zone, Fedora workstation, add the port, and then the protocol. Okay, and that's going to open up the port, and that's how you remove them. And that was for transmission. So I think that's pretty much everything I've gone through. I've only been on this a couple of days. Basically what happened was I installed Fedora 37 2 or 3 days ago, got everything set up, and then found out Fedora 38 was out. So did the update, and yeah, update was a piece of piss. Really easy to do. Again, you come to the update section here, you're going to see a big box. If you're on Fedora 37, it'll say Fedora 38. But remember, you need to click the refresh button, and it will show you some other stuff. All those first reboots, come back in here, refresh again, just to make sure, and then click the install Fedora 38. Took about a bit under an hour to download and install everything, and no problems at all. Everything's all set up. So that's pretty much most of the things I wanted to cover. There's here all the notes, and this is notes for changing the keyboard shortcuts, and this is notes I've just been going through in Emacs. So there are a couple of little gotchas on how things work, or things you've got to actually sort of set up, install the codecs, that kind of thing. And the reason for that is because Fedora is a US distribution, and obviously they're a lot more litigious in the US about codecs and that sort of thing. So that's why you've got to enable the codecs separately. But yeah, it's been rock solid, really nice. The only Linux distribution I've not used before, but yeah, it's pretty easy to get your head round. And also, the other thing that is important is it's easy to fix things. It's easy to actually apply standard Linux fixes to actually get some of this stuff working, like setting up the SSH agent using systemd, installing MPD, getting the scripts in user local bin to actually run without having to type out the full path. So you can actually get things working with some traditional Linux fixes. It's not an issue. So typically things you'll find for other distributions, you can apply to Fedora and actually get the stuff working like I've shown you. So that's Fedora 38 workstation on a Dell XPS 15 with Nvidia graphics card. Everything's working. The advantages are you get Btrfs, you get a nice easily installer. You got Pipewire set up by default. It was easy to get the graphics card working, the Nvidia graphics card. On Ubuntu, it's an absolute mess trying to get the Nvidia graphics card installed. It's got like a GUI installer, but it doesn't work. You try using it, and then if you try using the command line, only one option works, or you get like loads of Python errors. So installing the drivers on Ubuntu is an absolute pain. It was really easy on Fedora. We've got the latest version of Wayland. You've got the latest kernel. You've got GNOME without any. You've got vanilla GNOME basically. You don't have all the Ubuntu branding, -doc, that sort of thing. It's easy to remove some of the pre-installed applications like LibreOffice, that sort of thing. Wasn't too much hassle. So all in all, I'd say it's really good. Everything's set up and got latest software, latest version of MPV. You got latest version of ffmpeg 6. Got nice version of Emacs, so that's Emacs version 28.2 down here. It's a GTK version, but again, this is running under X Wayland, not the pure GTK version. But we also have the Alacritty terminal, so that's really nice. The terminal choice on Ubuntu is a bit limited without Alacritty. So yeah, latest software. We've got Btrfs, Pipewire by default. So couple of days, got everything set up. Never used Fedora before, didn't require too much searching for stuff. The only things that might be a bit unusual for you are the new package manager DNF, the new firewall, which is NF tables, and is slightly different, but you could replace that if you want to. But overall, really easy to get set up, and I'd thoroughly recommend giving it a try if you want to use something else. And hope some of those tips have been useful. Some of them a bit kind of obscure, that might not be obvious, that could do your nut in a bit. So hopefully something in there's been useful. And that's all for now. And I'll put links to all this under the video.